we've been playing a lot of sports. If you haven't caught that, we're huge advocates for not specifying a sport, specializing. Whatever.
Words are tough, man. Words are tough.
These words things. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Dogs on Couches.
Dogs on couches.
Coaches on couches.
Being slouches.
We have the slouch today on the couch. We're going to be interviewing my French bulldog Stitch today. She's not going to say much, but I'm sure we'll get something out of this end.
There'll be some snorting.
The wrong end.
Yep.
So today we are going to talk about kind of an interesting subject that transcends all sports and age, like chronological age. We're going to be talking about training age and what that should say typically about your training program and the different aspects of your training. But first, I am Coach Dale Sanford.
And I am Coach Bryant Funston. We are the co-founders of BPC Performance Coaching, where we specialize in helping time-crunched athletes optimize their busy schedules so they can maximize their athletic performance. Every BPC coach is trained in our 5 pillars coaching systems that has been developed over the last decade through our work with athletes of all ages and ability levels. From fresh off this couch, not this couch, the couch, to world championship competitors. You can find out more about BPC by going to buildpeakcompete.com, checking Facebook and YouTube at Build Peak Compete, or all up on that Instagram at BPC Performance. Spiel done.
Not too bad.
Spiel done.
All right, so we'll get to the topic of the day, but first, shout-outs.
Shout them out.
I got a few. So last week, Gulf Coast 70.3, John Zinn, Jay-Z. And Wayne Agozalek. I'm sorry if I butchered the last name.
I'm not much help.
Yeah. I actually heard him pronounce it the other day, and I was like, what was that?
Come again?
Yeah.
Come again?
Yeah. So they went down to Gulf Coast and got it done. Had decent days. It was definitely warmer down there than a lot of people were prepared for, and the swim was
rough.
Redunk. Yeah, it was. The swells were like, people were saying minimum 3 foot, like easily. Some were over 5. Even some of the pro folks were saying how bad it was.
Really?
Yeah. So it was a kind of rough day in the water, but other than that, solid day for them. And then Craig Justice. Old Craig, he knocked out his longest bike ride to date.
Nice.
Last week, had a pretty solid day. Nice part is he's been, he doesn't train on power or anything, so he rides a similar route, and we just, we notice that as his rides are getting longer, he's holding similar average speed. So all good there.
Excellent. My shout out is a throwback to last Sunday. Shout out to all the mamas out there.
The mothers.
All the mothers. I actually didn't have any people racing. So my shout out is to all those awesome moms.
Mother lover.
Mm-hmm. Moving on.
We've got some good lucks. We got good lucks.
Yep.
This weekend. For me anyways, the biggest race weekend of the year, one of two big race weekends of the year for local triathletes. Memphis MA Triathlon, both sprint and Olympic distance, is this weekend, and then the Chattanooga 70.3. We've got people going to both. It's basically everybody's racing this weekend. So
yeah, there should be a lot of shout outs next week.
Yeah, good luck everyone, and we'll shout it out next week.
Cool.
All right, jump in. All right, so first thing we got to do if we're talking about training age is to kind of talk and kind of define it. So your chronological age is basically the number.
Yeah, how many years you've been on this earth.
Yes. from
which
birth.
is totally different than your training age.
Yeah, so your training age, the simple definition is really the amount of years you've been in sport or training in sport. I would take that and probably that's a little bit too simplistic, but I would probably narrow it into years you've been training in a sport with similar demands. So like, for instance, both of us came from, like I came from a football background, you came from basketball. When we got into, I think we both agree, when we got into endurance sports, we were in no way, shape, or form prepared to compete at any level in endurance sports.
Yes, although we had trained for a long period of time.
Yeah, years and years.
The physiological demands and just all the fundamentals, the technique, everything that goes into being a good athlete and competitive within that sport was something that seemed totally foreign after my very first group ride, which I assumed, since I had decent fitness, general human fitness, was going to be a direct carryover. It was totally not.
You would think that coming from, getting to at least a Division I basketball level, that you could just jump into any sport and knock it dead.
And turns out there's certain equipment you should have too. The XX cutoff tee is not quite supreme.
Yeah. So we have to think of it in terms of time you've spent, and I would even break it into like hours spent, because somebody who's only been putting in maybe, a few hours a week in triathlon, and they've been doing it for, 10 years, is not going to have the same training age as somebody who's been smashing it, and getting in, 10, 12, 13 plus hours a week of training for 10 years. I mean, there's going to be completely different, stages in their athletic, journey. So,
and to go a little bit more, I know we talk primarily about endurance sports here, and typically cater this show to adults more so than youth, but we work with a lot of youth.
Yeah.
And anytime we have parents come to us, and parents that are listening, I mean, your kid is going to be, people say, at what age should my child start doing this? And that's where, as a parent, you need to know, like, well, how long have they been doing sports in general? How active has your kid been in general? There's going to be, an 8-year-old can vary widely.
Yeah.
Just like, an adult, as far as training is concerned, can vary widely, but even more so amongst kids, really.
Yeah.
You need to look at, where is your child at? And then whenever we're working with them, we're going to dive into more about it, but there's no set age amongst a youth that we're going to say, this is what you should be doing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Chronologically, it's got to be, if a kid starts in soccer when they're 4 years old, that doesn't mean within 3 to 5 years they should be training to compete.
Exactly.
And
we'll define what we mean by training to compete here shortly.
Yeah, there's some physiological things that happen in the body over time that you're kind of battling against as well when it comes to the type of training that you're putting an adolescent through. We'll get into that a little bit more.
And it's very easy for a parent to want their kid to be super competitive by the age of 9.
Yeah.
Which, as we dive into this, that's not the healthiest thing you can do.
So we've got essentially 6 different stages, training ages, that the first 3 we feel are pretty locked in. If you skip the first 3 or try to bounce around within the first 3, you're really kind of doing a disservice to like yourself or the athlete. You're doing the athlete is doing a disservice to themselves, or whomever's controlling the training here is doing a disservice for the longevity of that athlete, not just the longevity of them in the sport, because they could get burnt out and quit, but their like athletic potential could be hindered in the long run if you try to push them ahead too quickly. And
injuries become a lot more likely. One. Yeah. We've seen a lot of youth like cyclists, junior cyclists that you're like, oh gosh, winning national championships at 13 and exiting the sport at 17,
Yeah.
18 due to injuries that they just can't get over.
Well, there's a lot of pro triathletes who were like got into the sport super young and got to pro level pretty young. And then once they got to like, they kind of got to that stage where they were competing to win, like they just were broken all the time. Just could not, keep themselves together long enough to actually pull off a good result. So it does, like it affects the longevity. So you have to kind of play the long game here.
Exactly.
And develop the right stuff on the front end. So
if you take nothing else,
that's it.
play the long game.
Yeah.
And this is how to do it.
So first thing is you have to learn to train. That's stage one, learning to train. And all of that really means is you're trying to do consistent activity. It's like the age of doing. Like you're just trying to do as much as you can consistently. You're building a base level of strength and fitness so that you can handle bigger workloads later. Like if you decide that this is the right sport for you or, whatever activity you choose.
And training is very general.
Yeah, super general.
During this phase. You're not doing a bunch of super specific, sport-specific stuff. The more general, the more variety, the better. Dealing with a youth athlete.
Absolutely.
Them doing PE is a great thing. Playing multiple sports is a good thing. Just being active outside, going on hikes, just getting the body in motion, getting the body moving on a consistent basis sets the framework, the groundwork.
And you have to consider like if you do, like, this is, parents, listen up. If your kid has no base level of fitness and no base level of strength, they're going to have a really hard time getting any sport-specific skill work in because their body is not prepared for it. They can't physically hold body positions in order to gain those skills, and they can't do the workload that it's going to take, the repetition it's going to take to make those skills second nature.
Yep.
So if you're throwing your kid into super specific training and they have no base level of fitness or strength, they will gain almost nothing from it, and they'll probably learn to hate training. So this first stage, you introduce basic strength training movements. You introduce some low intensity. You introduce a little bit of high intensity. Multi-plane movements. I mean,
that is
everything
huge,
you put everything in there. It doesn't matter if you think your kid is going to be or you think you're going to be a pro triathlete one day. Like, you should still be moving laterally to get that skill, for one, the movement skill, and then start to activate and keep the muscles, the lateral movement muscles that actually stabilize the knee when you're going straight ahead. We need those muscles to be alive and well. So skipping this learning to train thing is probably like one of the biggest mistakes that parents make for their kids. And then it's one of the biggest mistakes that adult athletes make for themselves when they're like jumping into a new sport they have no experience in. They don't take any time to kind of learn to train. So,
or you have the, January 1st, we have the, I'm going to get back into shape, and it's straight to like, I'm going to go from on the couch to I'm training for a marathon that's 2 months away. You need to,
if you have
just get going again. Just get moving again. Be slow with it. Be progressive.
If you're well on the levels of training age, you can jump back in it a little bit quicker. But if you're still kind of in the first couple of levels, you kind of have to go backwards a little bit and then build it back up.
Patience.
So stage 2, you're loving training. Learn to love training. Stage 2, love train. This is like, I would say, probably the most important for youth athletes. Like, it's important for adults, but adults can come and go. Like, they'll come and go from a sport if they like fall out of love with it. But with kids, like, a lot of times, like, if they don't learn to love the training and the act of training, they just quit and never come back.
Yeah.
And you'll never know what kind of athletic potential they could have had because they just gave up on it too soon because it was like too in depth or too serious or too much of their life. So if you skip the learn to love training part, you're doing a disservice to either yourself or the athlete that you're making the decisions for.
Yeah, this is where keeping it fun. Funston. Coach B Fun.
The fundamentals.
Keeping it fun, yes, and working the fundamentals.
Yeah.
But training, practice. I mean, we're not saying you can't be competing. We're not saying a youth athlete signs up for soccer and says, nope, I can't do any of the games because I'm trying to first develop my learning to train and my love of training.
You'd be misunderstanding us.
You would be misunderstanding us. Yes, there's going to be competition along the way, but nothing should be so strict, so specific that burnout, it becomes a risk or it's just not fun to do.
And the big part with there is that the training volume is still not real high. You're spending or let's just say workload. I mean, you could be doing a decent amount, but the stuff that you're doing is fairly low intensity. So this is where you're learning a little bit more advanced movement skills, like running mechanics is awesome here. Lateral movement mechanics, any type of multi-plane movement, coordination. And this is where resistance training should be like really introduced. And to start to build the durability of the athlete before any like sport specific fitness is really started to build.
Yeah.
And they'll gain fitness through their practice and their games or like, as in terms of like an early stage triathlete or cyclist, you'll gain fitness by doing, and you'll gain fitness just by doing the skill sessions, because your overall training load over time has been low. So any more volume gains fitness.
Yep.
But like this is where the movement skills, like basic movement skills, need to be hammered in and worked on consistently. But really
and still keeping lots of variety.
Yeah.
No specialization.
Yeah, I don't mean like sport specific niche skills. I just mean skills that almost any athlete would use in any sport. The crossover skills, those are the things we're going through.
You're like becoming an athlete. Now you're sort of becoming a well-rounded athlete, not specializing.
And the other thing here, and this is big for adults and kids, is this is where the big social part of it comes in, and people learn to love to train because of the social aspect. Like, they may not really enjoy like having tons of intervals or intensity, or they may not like a specific drill that that you kind of do or work on a specific movement. But if they're doing it with a group, they'll still do it.
Yep.
Like they'll still get out there and do it and just want to be a part of a group or a team. And that's what a lot of people get into cycling and triathlon and running, is to be a part of a group. And so if you skip that part, it's really hard to want to keep doing that. Like later on, because training solo all the time gets a little lonely.
Yeah, we've had very few people who can train solo all the time and handle a super high amount of structure.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this numerous times, we intentionally build in like doing group rides, doing the stuff that's fun, that's not as structured, going out and doing rides without any data at all, just to keep it fun, keep the motivation up, and keep your love for the sport. There's a lot of athletes that they forget why they like the sport they're doing in the first place. And if you've gotten to that point, there's a good chance that you've been so focused on being so specific that you sort of lose the reason why you're doing it. And
this is kind of where like the people who are just checking the box, they skip this step. They sign up for an Ironman or a Century ride or something like that, and it's just a box to check. they train by themselves. They don't really get in a lot of, they just doing the volume it takes to finish. And then they get done. They're like, oh, it was terrible. Box checked. I'm out of here. Like, and you never see them again.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just, we can't skip the part where you actually learn to love training and the act of training.
Yep.
Because you're going to be doing a whole lot more training than you are racing.
Yeah.
Competing.
Yeah, for sure.
So stage 3 here is training to improve. So this one, like training to improve is basically more volume. So we're bringing in higher workloads, and there could be some intensity, moderate levels of intensity. I mean, on the whole, like X percentage of
and
your.
This is all relative, yeah. That's all obviously relatively speaking here.
But overall, it's still not super high volume, super high intensity, super sport specific. We're just increasing the training load on the athlete, and they'll improve. Like, you're still sticking to the skills focus. We can't lose that. We can start to introduce sport specific skills, but not like niche skills.
And it's not a year-round focused on
absolutely.
these
Training,
sport-specific
it's
skill.
a phase. There'll be a training phase of sport-specific skill focus in there. Especially for like triathlon and swimming. Like, you want to have some focus on your technique, but it can't be the entire focus. Like, it can't just be tons and tons and tons of technique work. Anything you get into a niche skill, and I think the
worst of all is probably baseball.
Okay.
I'm going to go straight there.
Go for it. Go for the jugular.
If you think about, especially like a pitcher, it's such a very specific motion, and baseball you can play year round.
Yeah.
And the amount of strain in a not real normal movement mechanic that's placed on the arm when throwing, if your body never has a chance to repair itself from that, recover from that, if there's no off season for that, and you're just constantly day in, day out, that's why you start seeing kids younger and younger. I forget the name of the surgery that
Tommy John's.
There you go.
Yeah.
That it's happening at younger and younger ages because they've gone straight from getting involved with baseball to trying to either past improve and going straight to like the compete phase that we're going to be stage that we're talking about here.
Like, not to like just dog on baseball, but
no,
like if your kid plays baseball, specifically if they're a pitcher, and your kid is not doing some sort of strength training to improve their shoulder, scapular, trap, entire upper body, like shoulder girdle, like everything, they're not like strengthening that, they're asking for an issue, if not early, at least later, like later in life. You have to have, the structure has to be ready for the demand. And if you're just going into sport-specific skill, throwing, the amount of torque and tension that goes through the shoulder and the arm during a pitch, especially when you're trying to throw as hard as you possibly can, is enormous. And you do that over and over and over and over and over
with no recovery.
With little recovery.
Exactly.
And you're begging for an injury. So there's a lot of good references out there for baseball specifically. Like if you want to look up a guy who specializes in baseball, Eric Creasy is a great
shout out.
Yeah, shout out to Eric Creasy. And another guy, Brett Cummins, is actually in Georgia. Creasy's in Florida. Brett Cummins is in Georgia. But they're both, like, if you follow them on like social media, they put out a ton of information, baseball specific information that's really good about shoulder care and stuff like that. I think every parent should be forced to look at. So those are two good references for baseball. But the point here is that in this training to improve stage, you have to really start to introduce higher strength training loads to prepare the body to better handle the demand of what you're going to put it through. So if you're going to, in a case of a triathlete, if you're going to increase your training volume to say like, 8 hours a week to 10 hours a week or to 12 hours a week, then your body has to be able to handle that. If you're just doing, specifically because you're doing a lot of non-weight bearing exercise, you're trying to add load to the body. If the structure is not ready, you're asking for breakdown. So strength training has to come to the forefront here. And then also, this is where you develop your recovery skills, because you're going to be doing training volumes. You're increasing training volumes, so you have to start to work on how to recover from those workouts and be ready for the next one.
Yep.
Even if you're like a single sport athlete, cycling or running or whatever, and you just have to be ready for the next training session. So if you don't think about recovery between those sessions, you're losing quality. And realistically, at this stage, the training to improve, quality starts to become more important than volume in general. Next one.
Moving on.
All right. So after you get through that training to improve, volume increases, we're going to go toward the training to compete.
Yeah, this is where you're starting to like realize your potential. Right.
And this could be, and I will put a note in there, and we talked about this earlier, that there are a lot of people that will never get here, like especially adult athletes. They may never get to this stage. They may jump to the sixth one, which we'll talk about, which we just kind of added in today. But they may not get to this stage, and that's fine. Like mentally, you may physically, you may not
have the time available.
Not a big deal. But if you're kind of going through the ranks of the athletic journey toward competition, we're going to get here. And usually, for an adult athlete, especially in endurance sports, this is usually like 3 to 5 years, like 3 seasons, like at least, before you can really think about putting in, or you should be thinking about putting in the volume and intensity to train to be highly competitive. Because if you haven't spent those first 3 years developing the skill, like the
skills, the strength, the foundation, the desire, and the ability, right, to handle higher level training volume and intensity, and the recovery that can allow you to push yourself to those upper limits, then you may forgo this stage, which is fine. I mean, like we said, it doesn't mean you don't get to compete.
Yeah, it's different.
We're talking about you realizing your potential of what you're capable of as an athlete, physiologically speaking.
Yep. And so at this level, training to compete, you have to bring strength to the forefront.
Yeah, have we talked about strength yet?
Yeah, did I say that? I'm pretty sure that started in round 1. Strength has to be brought to the forefront because of the demand you're putting on the body. The structure will break down. You're putting a lot of demand, so if you don't have the foundation of strength, the structure will break down.
And this is also when an athlete tends to get far more sport specific. Your movement patterns now get far more sport specific. You're not playing, take a youth, for example, where you're playing 6 different sports. You're playing soccer, you're playing baseball, you're playing football, you're doing a wide variety. Now you're really starting to specialize. You're wanting to see how much you can get out of your body within this sport. And within that, take cycling, for example, you're now working, typically your sport is a 12-inch circle that your legs are making. I mean, when you really think about it.
Yeah.
That is a very specific movement. And if you start thinking about all the auxiliary muscles that play a role in that, but aren't really being strengthened by that, that's where strength training can really help you out. And why we put such a big emphasis on it. You take triathlon and running as well. I mean, there's not a lot happening really when you kind of break down.
Yeah, pretty simple.
Very straight line, I mean, triathletes getting most of it. Yeah, triathletes getting the most dynamic from a movement standpoint. But there's a lot of muscles that are being neglected if you're not doing the strength work to address them. And with that, injury occurs
And
or a decrease in performance.
I will add this in, since we're referencing back to youth athletes. This may be a 3 to 5 year period for adults, but for kids, this is like tail end of high school.
Exactly. Yes.
You've been playing a bunch of different sports for years.
You've gone through maturity. You've gone through maturity.
We're pretty much through puberty. So
yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Maturity, puberty, same thing.
So these words things are bad. Not specializing in a sport until possibly that's where, like, if you want to continue on with that sport past high school, that's where you may start to consider
sophomore year kind of thing.
Specializing.
Yeah.
Not when you're 9, 10, 12, 14.
Exactly.
Like, keep playing. Like, that doesn't mean you can't train, but
your body will be healthier long term.
Sure. Absolutely. Anyways, a little tangent there.
No, it's valuable.
So sport, like, it's getting more sport specific. It has to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Because your sport has specific demands. So now we have to train for those specific demands. We're talking fitness building. You're training specific demands. This is where we start to get more into higher levels, higher volume of sport specific skill and niche movements and stuff like that. Like strengthening specific movements and training the movement and not the muscle. The big thing here is that your training loads are increasing again.
Volume and intensity is going up.
Absolutely.
Big time. So you're increasing that stress. This is, more explosive movements are being brought into it. Hopefully you've laid the groundwork, that foundation, to where now you can handle this larger training volume. That's the purpose of all those other stages, was to do that. But intensity is moving way up, which is of a far greater stress on the body. We've seen a lot of people that can handle increases in volume just fine, but once higher levels or more frequency of high intensity training comes into play, people can break down both physically and mentally.
And again, this is where, if we're talking about all the pillars of performance, recovery becomes even more important. The more intensity, the higher training load, the more recovery has to be a part of that whole training plan. I will say, in this train to compete, this is where we really start to introduce strategy, like race strategies and tactical things into races, because we're starting to try to really kind of dial in a lot of different facets that could gain us a few percent here and there. But this is kind of where strategies start to become more important.
You're able to execute the strategy better by this point in time.
Yeah. Your fitness is at a high level,
and you're looking for marginal gains where you can find them.
Yep. And so that's where we're training to be more competitive, not necessarily training to enter a competition. We have to keep saying that, because
there's a difference.
I feel like we have to keep saying that.
Yeah.
So the next stage, which is a small percentage of people get to this level, and it's mostly professional athletes.
Exactly.
Is the train to excel stage, or training to win, basically. And this is where the whole 10 years, 10,000 hours ideal comes into play, where you probably haven't mastered a skill or a sport or anything like that until you've been in it for 10 years or, done 10,000 hours of training. That's the kind of ideal here, where we're maximizing every ounce of training load that we can put in to test the body, to see how much it can actually go through. Recovery is absolutely crucial. Not only acute recovery, between sessions, and nutrition is a massive thing here. Every little detail at this stage is dialed in. that's where we're.
And the reason it's the professionals that are reaching this level is because that is their job.
Yeah.
It's not I'm training hard and then I'm going to work and then I'm doing that for 8 to 10 hours and then I'm doing another training session, then I'm doing family stuff, and then I'm getting 4 hours of sleep because there's no other time left in the day. You can't get to this Excel super, couple percent of the population by doing that. It just doesn't happen. You don't have the recovery possible to train as hard as you need to. Yeah. You may feel like you're training hard, but you're not stressing your body hard because of the fatigue that you're carrying.
And there is absolutely no way you'll get to this level without going through all of the previous. Mm-hmm. I don't
unless you are like a freak.
A
physiological freak.
Always the exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
But this is like training to excel. This is where tactical and strategy things are a must. The mental game is huge. Again, you're just dialing in everything that could affect performance, and even training to not even just specific levels for yourself, but training to handle specific levels that your competition can put out. Mm-hmm. Because if you're trained to win and somebody can run, 30 seconds faster than you off the bike, you better start to train to keep up with them.
Mm-hmm. And you better be working on your efficiency for sure. Like, where else can you get the advantage? If you don't have the physiological advantage, you better be maximizing your technical. If you're last,
or if you're mid to back of the group out of the water, mm-hmm. and that's the main difference, you need to train to be, mm-hmm. In the lead group out of the water. Mm-hmm. It's very, 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 very specific training to your needs and to the what your competition looks like. Mm-hmm. The last one, which we threw in here just recently, which we were talking, a lot of people may not reach the train to compete or train to win stages, just mentally or, life. Yeah. So you can jump right to this last one at any point, but it is a stage of your training age, which is training to age gracefully. And the high points here are you don't even need major race or event goals. The idea here is to stay active, healthy, mobile, high energy,
mm-hmm. Functional. Increasing your functional longevity.
Yeah, really. Absolutely. For as long as mm-hmm. possible, mm-hmm. Not stopping, becoming sedentary, and for a lot of people we coach, that is enough motivation to get them out of bed every day to mm-hmm. do their training. But this is where strength and mobility is priority one.
Yeah, you almost kind of go back to some of the earlier stages where you're again going more general.
Yeah.
Having the variety, putting a big focus on multi-plane strength movements, mm-hmm. And keeping that flexibility, range of motion, and ability. Balance becomes a very huge thing as well. But getting away from specialization again, and now you're going more into what do I need to do to be mobile, functional, happy, healthy? For people are living a lot longer, and hopefully everyone has the opportunity to live to an old age. But I only want to get there, and we have a lot of athletes that only want to get there if they're able to have a high quality of life still.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of your goal as you get older.
And that's not to say that you can't, if this is your stage of training age, that you can't enter a competition, mm-hmm. or you can't, do an event. I mean, for a lot of people, when they describe this training age for us, they say, I don't really have any event goals right now, but I just want to be fit enough that if in 3 weeks I wanted to do mm-hmm. a 50-mile ride or a sprint try or an Olympic try,
or jump in a mountain bike race,
I could just jump in and maybe not be competitive, but I just could jump in and do it for fun.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have to worry about whether or not I could finish.
Right. That I mm-hmm. wasn't prepared for it. So
Yeah, that's probably a third of our athletes
yeah,
that we work with.
Yeah, wanting to stay active, healthy, and at a decent level of fitness to where if something fun came along, they could go and jump in it and feel prepared for it.
And again, notice we did not put actual chronological age on any of this. I mean, there's stuff that happens in life. A 50-year-old, we were just talking about aging gracefully. Depending on how long you've spent in any of these other training phases, your life circumstances, your train to age gracefully may hit you at 50. It may hit someone else at 75. I mean, it could be totally different ages here, depending on how your body and life has hit you.
Yeah. If you get through that, like learning to love training age, then you can jump to this, like this, this age, this learning to or training to get age gracefully stage, and be perfectly happy and content with the training that you're doing, knowing that you enjoy it, two, you're doing what it takes to live a happy, healthy life for a long period of time. But also, if you wanted to jump in and mix it up, you could go and do that, because that's the fun part, for you.
And we said a lot of people stay in those first three, get into that improve where...
Should, yes.
Yeah. Where you may not be doing everything possible to maximize that last 5% or 10% of your potential. But the longer you're spending in that, having fun, training consistently, you're keeping a good training load, you're keeping some intensity in there, but you're still focusing on the strength aspect of it. We really preach strength quite a bit on this.
Did we say strength?
You're going to be, shout out to strength. You are going to be essentially delaying the time. You're already doing the aging gracefully thing. You're staying functional, healthy, and happy. You're by doing this, you're pushing your functional ability even longer. Your ability to race longer, to compete longer. It's not going to hit you at 35. How old am I? 37. Just waiting for all these injuries to start catching up to me.
Oh, you'll be all right. You got years of banked training age.
Bam. What did we miss?
I think that's about...
I guess the only thing we didn't really... and it may end up being a longer conversation, so we may not even touch on it, but we treat people differently based on whether or not they've been training in a different sport, from like how we would take them through these stages, I guess you'd say. So like you had already learned how to train, how to be consistent, how to be focused as a football player. I had already learned that as a basketball player. So when we transitioned over to endurance sports, we went through stages faster than what an athlete or someone our age, say, would have gone through those if they'd never done any sports at all.
Yeah.
Our bodies were better prepped and mentally we were better prepped and able to handle higher training loads quicker than what someone who
if you have a sports background, you can jump through, as an adult athlete, you can jump through, the learning to train and loving to train pretty quickly, because you've kind of already done that. And then you can kind of jump into training to improve, which you may have to stay in for a while. That's where it could be that may be a 3-year deal, like training to improve, because I know when I jumped into triathlon, I had basically been running a little bit and lifting heavy, a lot of heavy weights. And so it took, I did a lot of what I tell people not to do these days, but like I was in no way prepared to compete. I was back, mid to back age group, maybe finishing middle of the road. And part of that was just the athleticism from years of training. But it took me, I don't know, I probably raced for 7 years before I ever won a race or won a triathlon. So it's not a short, I guess the lesson to be learned is it's not a short process if you really are wanting to be competitive. And I think, bringing up, I know I've heard Kirsten Sass, who if you're not familiar with her,
we're gonna
multi-time
we're going to
triathlete
bring
of
her
the year.
on at some point in time soon.
I think she said on a podcast it took her about 7 or 8 years before she ever won a race, and then things started clicking. So
And one of the worst things that can happen, like I said, well, this is going to go on a tangent, but one of the worst things that can happen to you really could be having success super early too, because then you try to skip steps and go straight to, okay, well, I need to be super specific with all of my training. I need to jump straight to high intensity. I need to forego the volume, possibly forego the fundamentals, forego the strength, because I need to pour every ounce of time I've got into, okay, my weakness is sprinting. I'm going to be doing sprint training 2 days a week. I mean, it's so easy to taste success and want to accelerate your growth too soon. So
that's like the
trust the process.
The typical story for like a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old athlete. They're like really showing promise as a 9-year-old, running over people and all this stuff, and then by the time they get into that prepubescent into puberty and everybody else gets bigger than them pretty quickly, you don't know. Like with kids, you just don't know how they're going to grow. You don't know when they're going to get those gains. And so yeah, if you just keep working on like becoming an athlete and just stay in that stage and be patient, and
lay the groundwork. The groundwork, and you'll reach better results than you would otherwise.
Yeah, in the long run, you will. Like absolutely. Same thing for adult athletes, adult triathletes. If you spend the time on the front end, learning the skills, learning the technique, learning to be fast, learning proper, swimming, like all of those things, you're gonna be so much better down the road when you finally decide that you're ready to train to be competitive. It's like a night and day difference. I think that's it.
That's it.
All right.
That wasn't too long
of
a tangent.
Yeah, we added a
Still
tangent
fairly long,
and added about... All right, folks, we appreciate you hanging out.
Yeah, weigh in. Give us your thoughts.
Watching.
What do you think of our stages that we went through? Weigh in. Let us know.
Yeah, you can call BS on them. I don't care.
We'll get in a social media debate.
I'm all for it.
Cool.
All right, folks. Appreciate you listening, watching. We'll catch you guys next time.
Peace.
Adios.